Christine Chen of APIA Vote. Hello and welcome to So Jannelle. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Wonderful. Thank you for having this conversation. It's so important for us to be focusing on preparing for the elections.
Exactly. You know, in every election we hear, vote as if your life depended on it. Vote as if this is the most important election of our lifetime. And as the 2020 US election approaches, we are hearing the same thing, but we know for a fact that this could well be the most important US election in history.
You know, heading into the 2020 elections, I was already enthusiastic and hopeful for this community just because we saw that there was a lot more activism and organizing around issues for the last 4 years. The 2018 elections, we saw an increase of 49% of Asian American Pacific Islanders voting in comparison to other midterm elections. And then also in terms of younger voters, 18 to 34, they doubled their participation rate, right? And so typically at the beginning of the election cycle, you're so focusing on motivating people to go vote. But I believe this year that everyone understands the importance of voting and is making the connection of how your local elected officials, the people that you vote for, or maybe you didn't vote for, are making decisions that are impacting your life. Because of the pandemic, we're all tuning in, whether or not your kids can actually go back to school or if the businesses are going to be able to open. And it's all dependent on the policy decisions of these elected officials.
Right. You know, you were the founding executive director of this organization in 2006 and 2008, until 2008. Could you give us a background of APIA Vote? I mean, the mission, the vision, the objective.
So APIA Vote is a national non-partisan nonprofit organization that works with other nonprofits in 28 states to build their capacity to increase voter participation and civic participation in the community. We were actually started back in 1996 as a project of the organization Chinese Americans. At that time, I was a staff member, and a number of us decided we really need to start efforts in terms of mobilizing the community, because even though we're starting to see a lot more organizations get involved in public policy work, we were not as strong as our other communities of color because our community was not voting at the same rates. Since then, you know, we went ahead and spun off as a standalone organization in 2007, and we've now increased to partners in over 28 states. It's been really exciting to see the numbers increase as we continue to educate and motivate nonprofit leaders that they have a right to do this type of work, even as a nonpartisan organization, nonprofit, and that there is a role for these nonprofits to make sure that we talk about the voting process and empower their own members to make sure that they register and vote.
And it looks like it is working because, as you mentioned briefly earlier, the difference between this election and the last election, for instance, I know that steadily AAPI participation has changed or grown through the years. Can you talk more about that? And what do you think contributes to the growth? I know this year was big because of the pandemic. And as you said earlier, a lot are realizing that who they voted for, maybe did not vote for, could affect or are affecting the reality that we're living in right now.
Well, the reality is that for the 2020 elections, you know, we make up 5% of the nation's eligible voters. You know, that essentially equates to 11 million Asians who are eligible to vote, right? So because of the growing numbers that we've had, we're starting to get recognition that, yes, we could be a swing vote as we've seen in the last few years in Nevada and Virginia. But also because of our growth in numbers, we are being seen as a viable electorate that they need to pay attention to, like in Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, Arizona, Michigan, right? And these elections are being won in such narrow margins. But at the same time, I need to remind all of our family and friends that in 2016, only 56% of our community were registered. So you might as well assume that only half of your family and friends are ready to cast their ballot and are registered. So that's something we need to really focus on for the next 2 weeks before all the registration deadlines come upon us.
Yes, we're going to be talking about the registration information also later on. Christine is helping us with that. This segment is being made possible by the collaboration and support of AARP. And Christine, you mentioned that APIA Vote has a lot of partnerships with nonprofits all over the US. And AARP is one of those big nonprofits with members that they can educate. We together can educate about what's going on right now.
That's correct. ARP is a great partner of API Vote. They understand the needs of specifically creating translated materials and messaging that will resonate with this base of voters. So we are working with them. They've also have supported us in expanding our mail program, where API Vote this year with our local partners are mailing to 700,000 households in over 20 states. These are state-specific translated mail that's going to voters directly to make sure that they understand the process of making a plan to vote, where there are various options for early voting, and if they need language assistance, what type of Asian hotline that they could call upon and get the assistance that they need. In addition, with ARP, they also supported our 2020 Asian American Voter Survey. So that way we could make sure that we have most up-to-date information about the Asian American electorate. And so we understand where they're at and where we need to meet their needs to make sure that they're able to go vote.
Speaking of that survey, Christine, there are some slides that are quite interesting to see. And one of those is the slide showing the enthusiasm per Asian American group. And the Filipinos are indexing very high on that. What do you think contributes to that?
Well, it's been really exciting to see that with our Asian American Voter Survey, we really dig in deep in terms of the top 6 Asian ethnic communities. And in terms of most enthusiastic community, the Filipinos rank the most enthusiastic. It goes back to there's been a number of community organizations and also states where Filipino Americans really made a difference in the elections. I would say Nevada is a clear example in terms of their growth in numbers as a population and how that has translated into voters. And Filipino Americans have been organizing in Nevada and have been courted by both Democrats and Republicans, candidates and the political parties in getting them to register and to actually go vote. The other thing, though, I would like to note is that 48% of this community that was polled had noted that they plan on voting by mail. So even though there's a large enthusiasm, we need to make sure that they are equipped with the correct information and understand the process and deadlines to be able to vote by mail or to also take advantage of early voting opportunities dependent on what state they're located in.
You know what, Christine, let's talk about that now. I know that we are just a few weeks out. We're reminding people to register. You mentioned statistics earlier about registration and maybe the safe assumption about how maybe just half of the number that we could get are registered. So how do we do that now? How do we get others to register? What are the things to remember when it comes to registration and registration deadlines? And how do we know if we're even registered? There's a lot of questions.
Right. So ARP, as well as API Vote's websites, we have an extensive election pages for all the different deadlines. So that way you could learn about the process and making sure that you are registered properly. Now, even for those that think that they're already registered, we're encouraging you to check your registration. A number of states are purging lists and cleaning up their lists. So we want to make sure that you are still registered as a voter. Then, in addition to that, we need to take individuals through the process of understanding how do they make their plan to vote. So this actually encompasses thinking through, one, am I planning on voting early or voting on election day? If I plan on voting early, is it going to be by mail or is it going to be voting in person early? And so that actually will determine the different process and deadlines that you need to go ahead and accomplish to ensure that you are able to cast your vote. Now, individuals are really going to be the most effective in making sure your family and friends are able to go vote. During this pandemic, our organizations are very limited in terms of being able to engage with strangers. Typically, we meet them at the community festivals, at the different Asian grocery stores and gathering places where we naturally come together. But during this time of pandemic and being safe, we really are relying on everyone to use your personal relationships. But we're asking you to dig a little bit deeper. Think about that individual that may be distracted and is not focusing on the elections. Who is that auntie or uncle that is maybe limited English proficient or is a most recent immigrant and does not necessarily understand the process of voting? Those are the people we're asking you to go through your contacts, reach out to them, and start the conversation to make sure that they're vote ready for this election.
Those who have recently changed their names because of a marriage, perhaps, those who have recently gotten their US citizenship that are over 21 and can vote, those are the people that we need to remind first to check if they're registered to vote or to register to vote. But Christine, they can't delay because there is a deadline to register.
Yes, the majority of states are coming up with their registration deadlines in the next 2 weeks. There are only 19 states that allow you to register to provide same-day registration. So we encourage you to go to apivote.org/register. You could quickly do it online and be able to get that done within just minutes.
Right. I just checked mine. It takes just minutes. You can also do it on your phone. I was doing it, I think, right as I was going to bed. But, you have to make time for it. But then I saw as well, Christine, that I'm registered to vote by mail. And you mentioned that a lot of the Filipinos had said during the survey that they are registered and they are voting by mail. Can you give us some top pointers when it comes to voting by mail?
To be able to vote by mail, you need to go ahead and make sure, one, that you apply and complete the application to request a mail-in ballot. There are some states that are automatically going to be sending that to you, but a large majority of the states are requiring that you go online and go ahead and apply for that. Once you receive the application, you should make sure that you read the instructions very carefully. We are hearing that some ballots are not necessarily deemed as viable ballots because they're not signed or they missed answering a question. So it's really crucial that you read the instructions and follow them to a T. Different states, once again, have different protocols in regards to that. Then you have to decide, once you've completed your ballot, is there enough time for you to mail it back? Or is there an option for you to drop it off at your polling location or at drop boxes before the election day?
Right. It seems like a lot, but think of it this way: we're investing our time for our future. We're investing it in our future of our community, and in the future of our families. Christine, just one last question before I let you go, or before my second to the last question, I guess. When you talked about the survey, you also talked about the issues that resonate more with the APIA community. What are some of those?
And a lot of the issues have not changed from previous years. They continue to be healthcare, especially with the pandemic, jobs and economy, education. But the one issue that has popped up a lot more is racial equity. I think that goes back to the rise of anti-Asian sentiment that we're experiencing here in 2020, and our experience in terms of working with the African-American community with the Black Lives Matter movement. So those are some of the newer, that's a newer issue that is actually popping up as a higher priority for our base of voters now.
And the issues that Christine have just mentioned, those affect our daily lives in one way or another. And so if we want our voices heard, we need to stand up and get counted in this upcoming election. Christine, my last question to you is, we talked about a lot of things, and you were wonderful, great speaker, a lot of information. But if people were to forget the last 5 minutes or so of our conversation, what is the one thing you want them to remember?
That to just take action now. There's there's so many ways that you could go ahead and take action, whether it's to register to vote or to go ahead and apply for your ballot, or to even reach out to a friend or family to make sure that they're also vote ready. At this particular point in time, I don't think any of us can afford to not take any action. Otherwise, you're going to be asked the question years down the road, what did you do in 2020 to help get out the vote? What will you say? And what kind of future are you looking for? I think it's only, the future that you're looking for is only available if you actually go and vote.
Right. And of course, we have heard that said many times as well. Our actions now affect our tomorrow. There's no doubt about it. And so, Christine, thank you so much for carving time out. I know you're very busy these days, but thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thank you.